it's Nicole Nowosad here today for Scrapbook and Cards Today magazine, and today we're going to talk all about heat embossing and using watercolors. I have this really pretty stamp set created by Angie Blom for SCT Delivered. You can see it has this really gorgeous hand-drawn floral image, as well as some different sentiments that you could use definitely for a card. Today I'm going to use them on a scrapbook layout. So I've already done this a few other times, but I'm just going to repeat my process one last time just to show you how I got my colored images. And what I've done is I've stamped with Versamark ink onto some watercolor paper with that really beautiful stamp. I'm going to go ahead next and just add some Lawn Fawn white embossing powder, and I'm just going to then heat set that with my heat tool just to get it nice and ready to go. If you get any embossing powder in different areas of your project, you can see I just use a clean paintbrush and I just kind of dry that away. If you leave those little bits on there, you will end up heat setting them and it will kind of make a bit of a mess on your project. So I'm going to really quickly just heat set this. It doesn't take very long to do this. I've done this 3 or 4 times already, and it's hard to tell on this paper because it's white, but you can tell that the embossing is set because it goes kind of like from a dull matte to a shiny, more gloss of a image. So once the image is all heat set, then you can go ahead and start getting your watercoloring ready. You can see that doesn't take very long, just a few minutes. The good thing about this stamp set is you can purchase a coordinating die, and I've done that. I'm just going to die cut this out later on instead of having to fussy cut the whole thing. So now I'm just going to go ahead and choose my watercolor paints. I actually have a mixed media mat I'm going to bring out just to make this a lot easier. And I'm just going to, because it's glass, just add a whole bunch of those watercolor paints onto the glass mat, and that'll be a good holding space for all the different colors that I want to use. So I'm going to grab my Vicki Boutin watercolor markers, and I'm just going to add a whole bunch of drops. So I'm going to do some variations of red and coral, as well as pink and yellow, purple, green, and some blues. And I'll add in a few Jean Davenport watercolor markers as well, just to get a variation of colors. And you can see when you add it onto the mixed media mat, it goes really really quickly. You don't need a lot. I'm just adding a few little drops of each color, and it's kind of handy because you have the squares on the mat to kind of help you keep it all contained into that one area if that's what you want. I'm going to just choose a bit of a light and a dark of each of the colors just so I can get a variation when I go to do my watercoloring. And I want to add some accent colors as well, so some things that I might not use a whole lot of, but like this purple here, or even one of the blues that I'm going to use that is pretty dark, and I'll just use that a little more sparingly. But again, just a little tiny drop of each color works perfectly, and again, a good variety of colors with all the different markers that you can get. There are a lot of different companies that make liquid watercolors like this. I'm going to use some from Pink Fresh Studio as well, and I know Hero Arts makes a really wonderful set that would work just as wonderfully. So it kind of depends what colors you want on your project. I think I'm just going to grab my yellow here by Pink Fresh. It's a bit of a darker yellow, and this one's more of an eyedropper type of container, so I'm just going to add a few drops here. And now I'm going to go ahead and add just a touch of blue, and then I have a clear jar of water standing by, and I'm going to use a clean water brush here, paintbrush, and I'm just going to add some water onto the watercolor paper in the areas I want to start painting in. So what I'm doing is I'm going to start with the leaves. So I'm going to add all the water into the areas where there's leaves on the stamped image. And what I'm going to do is add that. It's going to kind of sit on the paper. That's why we're using the watercolor paper, so that it doesn't warp as much later on. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my paintbrush and just lightly dab tiny little pieces of the color into that water. And what will happen is it will almost like explode into your water and kind of just spread out. So I'm starting with that lighter color here. This is a mint green color, and that will kind of get the base of my color for the leaves. And then I'm going to go in and grab a bit of a darker green, and I'm just going to tap just the tiniest amount into that water that's still sitting there, and it will keep continuing to spread. So that'll just add more depth to that green area onto my stamped image. So you can see, really simple. You don't need a lot of paint. I'm using a very fine paintbrush for this, only because the image is just so dainty and delicate on its own. I don't want to have a big paintbrush and kind of just slop all the paint all over the place. So really delicate. You just add tiny little drops of color. And again, you're not really painting it as much as just dabbing it on because you have that water there, it really is going to help move the paint around a little bit for you, so you don't have to do a whole lot of work. Now I want to have the darker color more towards the center of the stamped image and not so much on the outside, so that's just the way I'm doing that, but definitely you could play with this in many different ways as you wanted. I'm going to continue with the green, just adding green into the different leaf images. And then I'm going to just clean that off and use some more water again onto another image. So what I like to do is I like to pick something not super close to where I have just watercolored, just because the paint will tend to kind of spill into that water area. So try to pick something that's farther away or separated so that you're careful, you don't have to get too worried about having things kind of melt together. So I'm going to use this light purple here to color in this really pretty flower, and then just take the darker purple and add some dabs here just to the bottom, just to get that purple flower just a little bit deeper. I wish my camera was a little bit closer up so you can see that, but I will definitely show you some images later on. So again, you can just take that purple, the darker purple, and just kind of pull that into the bottom of the flower, and even a little bit of blue like I'll do right here will help deepen that up just even more and just give some really easy kind of dimension and texture to that flower. So again, you just take your water brush when you're ready, and I'm going to speed up a little bit more now, and I'm just going to add in water to set the larger flower and then make my way around. You can really see here with the pink and the red that I am just kind of pouncing that color, just dabbing it in ever so lightly. I'm not adding brush strokes. It's just a lot of dabbing and moving along, and you can mix the colors as well. So don't feel like you want to create your own, like orange, for example. You could definitely mix the yellow and the red together, and just each flower can be completely different. So I think I've done this same stamped image 4 times for my layout, and each one of the floral groupings looks a little bit different each time that I did it. You could definitely make them all the same as well. And this flower just works really pretty as a layering element on a project. If you think you have a little bit too much water or color, you can actually just take a paper towel there like I did and just dab a little bit off. And if you're ever worried about how things are going, you can just heat set it here with your heat tool. It really is best to let it kind of dry naturally, but because of the nature of doing a video, I just wanted to speed things along so that I can get this finished on the video for you. And you can see, just make sure you keep your clean brush clean and your colored brush colored, I guess. So you make sure you don't mix the two between, otherwise you could have a bit of a mess there. And just add in a lot of color all the way throughout that design. I really love the white effect too of the embossing. It just makes a nice, pretty, it reminds me of a pretty Hallmark image, to be honest. All right, so I have those all ready to go. Now I just want to get started on my layout. So I have this stencil here by Vicki Boutin and my black art crayon and a Vicki Boutin stencil brush. And I'm just going to lightly ink up the background with that stencil, kind of on a bit of an angle. I don't want this to be perfect. I kind of want to have a bit of a messy kind of text background. And then you can see here that I've gone ahead and added a photo that's with a few pattern papers layered behind it. And I've just die cut out all those flower groupings, and I've added them kind of around the edge of that stenciled area on my page. And now I want to add just a title, really simple title, and I'll use one of these sentiment stamps for journaling on my project too. So I'm adding some foam adhesive behind these large letters. I just wanted them to pop up a little bit because I had popped up those hand painted flowers, and I kind of just thought that would add a little bit of nice dimension too. So this is a 2020 page, so I'm going to add the word 2020. You can see I'm kind of overlapping that sticker just underneath the flower there and over top of the layer on the photo. And that's just to kind of make everything meld together and float nicely. Sometimes if you have a lot of harsh, stark lines, things might look crooked when they're not supposed to be. But if you kind of have things a little off kilter on purpose, then generally no one will notice if things are off a little bit. So that's my little tip for you today, is try not to make it completely perfect all the time. All right, just a little bit more foam adhesive, pulling off the back of that, and then just layering my stickers. And then all that's left to do is add a little bit of journaling. And in this case, I've decided I'm going to go ahead and use one of the sentiment stamps from my from that same stamp set. And I have a few different die cuts here I'm going to layer from this Dear Lizzie collection that I have in my stash. So I have some chipboard, I have some die cuts, and then I'm going to rip off a piece of washi here just to add a quick layer. And then I will finish off my project with that sentiment that I'm going to stamp with some Close to My Heart black ink, and I'm actually going to stamp it onto a piece of vellum and then cut the vellum down with some decorative scissors, to be honest. On the bottom edge, I'm just going to use some pinking shears just to kind of create a little bit of a wired edge, and then I'm going to layer a few other stickers onto my chipboard, and that will pretty much finish off my project. Just a couple little hearts and flowers with some enamel dots and stuff around the page, and that will kind of finish everything off. So a really fun way to create a project with watercolors and stamps that you probably bought for a card project, but you could definitely use those on your scrapbooking as well. It does not need to be just for a card. You can definitely stretch your stamps this way, and I'll tuck the sentiment in here. Now let's see some close-up shots of that watercolor painting so you can kind of see all the details and the depths of color that we got from that watercolor effect. So really, really pretty way to do that, and pretty fast and easy. You don't need a lot of materials, so a little bit does go a long way, and you can see the more you get better at, like the more you practice, the better you get at it. It's definitely something that improves with the amount of time you spend doing it. That's it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I will see you again next month on Design with Nicole. Bye-bye.